Beneath the scorching New Mexico sun, rancher Marcus Webb guided his dusty mare through the wasteland at a measured pace, each hoofbeat stirring clouds of desert sand. 4 hours, he'd been tracking a wandering bull, following hoofprints that had nearly vanished in the sun-baked ground. This desolate expanse offered him solace, the profound quiet interrupted only by creaking saddle leather, whistling wind, and the distant cry of a circling hawk. Marcus treasured these moments of solitude, where silence reigned supreme. Then came an unexpected sound, barely audible, perhaps just the breeze playing tricks. A noise resembling a forgotten exhale. He stiffened in his saddle, tilting his head, pulse quickening. The sound returned, a faint cry, fragile and piercing, like a violin string about to break. Swiftly dismounting, he secured his horse's reins to a weathered branch. Rifle across his shoulders, he navigated through scattered juniper trees and rocky outcroppings until he discovered a natural amphitheater surrounded by ancient cottonwoods. There, suspended beneath the largest tree, was a young woman. Her arms were bound above her head, wrists secured with rope, body hanging limp as a discarded puppet. Her toes barely grazed the earth. Sun-bronzed skin bore layers of grime, while her raven-black hair was tangled with perspiration and dried blood. Her breathing came in quick, uneven gasps, but life still flickered within her. Marcus's attention fixed on the rough wooden placard hammered into the tree bark above her. Bold red letters, painted with fury and hatred, declared, "White man don't forgive." An involuntary step backward, nausea rising in his throat. The atmosphere grew oppressive, part threat, part declaration, part malediction. He surveyed the surrounding terrain, searching ridgelines and boulder formations. Nothing stirred except wind rustling through brittle leaves like phantom voices. His fingers found the blade at his hip. "Dear God," he whispered, "what horrors have they inflicted upon you?" The captive woman stirred slightly, her head drooping forward, revealing angry welts where the rope had carved into her flesh. He forced down his revulsion. "Can you hear me?" he called out, voice cracking. Silence. "I mean you no harm," he said more gently, speaking as much to himself as to her. His boots scraped against stone as he approached. Her features became clearer, youthful, perhaps 18 winters, with prominent cheekbones and determined jawline, her face gaunt from dehydration. Crimson stained her lower lip. Testing the rope's tension, he found it crafted from twisted mesquite fibers, coarse and weathered. Whoever had secured her here intended prolonged suffering, not swift execution. Drawing his knife, his hands trembled. That accusatory sign haunted him, echoing with unspoken guilt for crimes he'd never committed, yet somehow felt responsible for. Another weak groan from the woman shattered his hesitation. "Damn them all," he muttered, pressing steel to rope. "I'm not what they claim." One decisive cut severed her bonds. She collapsed forward into his waiting arms. Her fevered body felt weightless, as if pain had consumed her very substance. Dark eyes fluttered open, terrified, confused, struggling to focus. Marcus lowered her gently to the ground, kneeling in the dust. He dampened a cloth with water from his canteen and moistened her parched lips. "Rest easy," he murmured. "You're protected now, at least temporarily." She blinked slowly, twice. No words emerged, but her fingers weakly grasped his shirt sleeve. He glanced once more at the hateful sign, then at her vulnerable form, before removing his jacket and wrapping it around her trembling shoulders. "What do they call you?" he asked softly. No response. "We'll discover that in time," he said. Rising carefully, he lifted her fragile form, cradling her like precious cargo. "For now, you're under my care." With that declaration, Marcus Webb retreated into the wilderness, carrying a condemned woman and bearing a burden that could destroy any man. The sun hung low when Marcus reached his homestead, a humble outpost clinging to the desert's edge, where violence lingered like morning mist. A solitary windmill creaked against the horizon, and the weathered barn sagged with the weight of forgotten sorrows. The house itself, single room plus loft, roof patched with salvaged metal, stood resolute and honest, like its builder. Marcus carefully removed the woman from his saddle and carried her inside. Fever consumed her, her head pressed against his chest as whispered breaths escaped like autumn leaves dancing across stone. He placed her on his cot and removed the jacket, moving slowly to avoid startling her. Her eyes opened briefly. Deep, wide, distant, but they watched him intently. Lamplight flickered against wooden walls as he filled a metal basin with water and positioned it near her feet. Retrieving clean cloth from a shelf, he knelt beside her. Her legs bore purple bruises and scrapes, one ankle swollen, rope burns marking her wrists like cattle brands. "I won't cause you pain," he said, more to fill the silence than expecting acknowledgement. "Just cleaning these wounds." He soaked the cloth in warm water and wrung it out, then gently, reverently, took her right foot and lowered it into the basin. She flinched almost imperceptibly. He paused, waiting. When she didn't withdraw, he began washing away the accumulated dust and dried blood. His movements were tender, precise, as if handling something sacred. The water turned rusty brown as he worked in silence, careful not to stare too long, though he felt her gaze upon him like a blade half-drawn, uncertain whether to strike or fall. Her lips parted once as if to speak, but no sound emerged. "Reckon you don't speak much," he muttered, not unkindly. "That's fine. Silence beats most conversation." He finished cleansing the first foot, then the second. She permitted his ministrations. When completed, he wrapped both feet in soft cloth strips and positioned them gently on a folded blanket. "You remind me of a stream I used to camp beside," he said quietly, almost to himself. Dry most seasons, appeared lifeless, but after the rains it ran swift and deep. Had a proper name, but locals called it Quiet Snake. Never knew why. Just quiet. He studied her again in the lamplight, cheekbones sharp as mountain ridges, lips cracked but full, dark lashes thick with sand. Too young for such suffering, yet something ancient dwelt behind her eyes, something that didn't flinch from pain but simply waited for it to pass. "I'll call you Maya," he said softly. "Just for now. You look like a Maya, quiet but strong." She blinked once, slowly. No protest, no agreement. Just breath. Just being. Marcus rose, hands still damp, and reached for a blanket to cover her. He tucked it around her shoulders, then stepped back. "If you're hungry, there's beans. Not much, but better than nothing." Still no response. He grabbed his bedroll and dragged it toward the door. He would sleep by the barn tonight, giving her space. It wasn't proper for her to be watched by a stranger, especially one with blood in his past and questions in his eyes. Before stepping outside, he looked back once more. She had shifted slightly, eyes closed, lips no longer trembling. The basin still sat beside the cot, stained with the color of what had been done to her. He carried it outside and emptied it, watching the water soak into the thirsty earth. Inside, she dreamed of fire, of horses, of ropes cutting skyward, and of gentle hands washing away pain without demanding anything in return. The following days passed with the slow rhythm of desert life, but the silence within the house had changed, thicker, charged with something just beyond comprehension. Maya, as Marcus continued calling her, ate when he brought food, though sparingly. She moved with caution, eyes always alert, posture tense like a caged animal too long confined. She never spoke, but he caught her watching him when she thought he wouldn't notice. At night, Marcus surrendered the cot to her and retreated to the barn, rifle beside him. He claimed it was to provide her privacy, but the truth was more complex. He was afraid, not of her, but of what her presence meant. That sign on the tree still burned in his memory, "White man don't forgive." Whoever wrote it had intended her slow death, and whoever they were might still be coming. 3 mornings later, he discovered the first boot print, slightly smaller than his own, newer, angled toward the barn. Marcus crouched beside it in the hard-packed dirt, studying the heel. Military issue, cavalry. The print was fresh, no more than a few hours old. He rose slowly, eyes scanning the ridgeline. Nothing but sagebrush and heat shimmer. Back inside, Maya sat by the window, still and silent. She didn't look at him when he entered, but her body tensed. "You seen anyone?" he asked. She said nothing, only pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I think we've got company," Marcus murmured, more to himself. That evening he kept the lantern low and stayed on the porch, rifle across his knees. The wind had died, coyotes howled in the distance, and stars blinked into view like ghosts awakening. Maya didn't sleep, he could hear her moving inside, pacing the floor in slow circles. Around midday the next day, the rider came. Dust curled behind the chestnut horse as it approached. The man atop wore the blue and gold of the U.S. Cavalry, rifle holstered, hat low, jaw rough with stubble. Marcus stepped down from the porch, one hand resting casually on his belt. The soldier reined in his horse and squinted down. "You called Webb?" "Depends who's asking." "Lieutenant Torres, Dust Hollow Station. We're tracking a fugitive." The man pulled a folded notice from his breast pocket and handed it down. "You seen this one?" Marcus took the paper, already knowing what it would show: a crude sketch of a young Apache girl, sharp eyes, long hair. The words: wanted for murder and escape, dangerous, reward $500. Marcus looked up slowly. "Can't say I have." "You sure?" the soldier asked, leaning forward. "Small, quiet, might be hurt, might be hiding. We think she was rescued or taken by someone passing near the Cartonwood Flats." Marcus held the paper a second longer, then folded it and handed it back. "Ain't seen nobody but jackrabbits and a cow that don't listen." Lieutenant Torres narrowed his eyes. "She's not just a runaway, Mr. Webb. She's part of a violent group. Savages. That sign they left, they mean it." Marcus's jaw tightened. "If I see anything, I'll send word." The soldier studied him for a moment longer, then nodded once and turned his horse. "See that you do." Marcus watched him ride off until the dust disappeared. Inside, Maya stood just beyond the curtain. She had heard every word. She stared at him, unmoving. He stepped inside, took off his hat, and leaned it against the door. "They came looking. Showed me a paper. Said you were wanted." She did not speak. "I told them no." Her eyes narrowed, confused, suspicious. "I don't know what you did, Maya, and maybe someday you'll tell me. But out here, a man makes choices. I made mine." He turned to the stove, pretending to stir the beans he had already prepared. Behind him, she moved, barely a shift, a small breath, and in that moment, trust cracked the silence just a little wider. The afternoon sun hung low, casting long shadows across the yard as the wind softened. It had been a strange day. Too quiet, like the desert was holding its breath. Marcus sat on the porch, sharpening his knife with slow, rhythmic strokes. Each pass of steel on stone echoed faintly through the open yard. He focused on the motion more than the blade, as if the repetition might keep his thoughts from drifting too far toward the woman inside. He paused, cocking his head. The faint crunch of footsteps on gravel reached his ears. Not a coyote, not a horse, something lighter, human. He looked up. Maya was outside. It was the first time she had stepped beyond the threshold on her own since he brought her home. Her bare feet touched the earth tentatively, like she was testing if it would still hold her. The woven blanket hung from her shoulders, trailing like a second skin. She walked slowly, her steps uneven but certain, toward the far end of the yard where the barn stood watch. Marcus set the knife aside, not moving at first. He watched her, not wanting to shatter the moment. She looked smaller in the light, more fragile, and yet something in the way she moved had changed. She was not escaping, she was reclaiming. She reached the bare patch of dirt near the barn, a place where the wind had swept clean all debris. There she knelt carefully, as if kneeling before something sacred, and let the blanket fall to her elbows. Her fingers moved with purpose as she picked up a stick and began to draw in the dust. Only then did Marcus rise. He walked over slowly, boots quiet on the dirt, giving her space. He stood a few feet behind her, watching her hand trace lines into the earth. In the dirt, she had drawn a bird, wings stretched wide, mid-flight, but flames encircled it like a burning crown. The lines were bold and sharp, etched with tension. The bird looked alive and in agony, its wings angled upward as though trying to escape the fire or rise with it. Marcus had seen war, seen symbols carved into rifles and burned into skin, but this was something older. A cry, a prayer. He squatted beside her, his voice low and respectful. "What's that?" Maya did not look up. Her face remained still, eyes focused on the drawing. For a long moment, she said nothing, as if deciding whether or not to let the memory free. Then she spoke. "Bird in fire," she said, voice dry and cracked like riverbeds in midsummer. "My people's sign." Marcus remained silent, his eyes never leaving the image. She tapped the center of the bird with the stick. "This was my father's. Our family. We painted it on tents, carved it on boughs. Always flying, always fire." Marcus could feel the tension in her body, the way her shoulders pulled back, the tightness in her jaw. She was bracing for something. "They come, soldiers, white coats, last spring," she continued haltingly. "Say we must move. Far, dry place. No food, no water. Say we're danger." She paused, the stick in her hand trembling. "We say no. We stay. We fight." Her voice thinned. "They burn. Kill my mother, my 2 brothers. Burn the old ones inside the tent." Marcus clenched his fists slowly, jaw tight. Something old and angry stirred in his chest. "I run. Hide. They find me. Beat. Tie me. Call me thief. Say I took rifle. I didn't." Then she turned, locking eyes with him for the first time. There was fury in her voice now. "I did not steal. I did not kill. I did nothing wrong." Her voice echoed in the open air like thunder across dry land. Marcus did not speak for a moment. Then his voice came, low but certain. "I believe you." She turned back to the dirt, dropped the stick. Her hands fell into her lap. Then her shoulders began to shake. At first, she made no sound, just silent tremors, but then the sobs came, raw and unfiltered. She curled forward, arms wrapped around her knees, hair falling like a curtain. The pain was too big for her body, and it poured out in waves. Marcus stayed beside her, unmoving. He did not reach for her, did not try to comfort with empty words. Instead, he reached out and pressed his hand into the dirt beside the flaming bird, palm down, fingers spread. His skin against the dust she had shaped with grief. It was not touch, it was testimony. She felt it. Eventually, her breathing slowed. She lifted her head, her face streaked with dirt and tears. Their eyes met, unshielded. "You can call me Maya," she whispered. Marcus gave a small nod, voice like gravel and wind. "All right then. Maya it is." They sat together in silence as the sun slid behind the ridge and the fire bird in the dirt faded into shadow. But its ashes, like the truth, remained.